She called me insecure for saying no, then I found the texts that destroyed everything we built. She kissed him all over, lit up like Christmas morning, and started describing exactly who would be with who. And not once, not for a single second, did she stop to ask if he was okay. That is the moment this whole story cracks open. But to understand why that moment hit so hard, you need to go back to where this nightmare actually started. This guy had been with his fiancée since high school. Almost 10 years. A decade of his life, his love, his loyalty, all poured into one person. Think about what 10 years actually means. It means you watched each other grow up. It means you were there for the awkward years, the uncertain years, the years where you were both still figuring out who you were becoming. It means holidays and birthdays and late nights and inside jokes that only make sense to the two of you. He was not some commitment phobe looking for a way out. He was the opposite. He was the guy who stayed. The guy who believed they were set for life. The guy who looked at the future and only ever saw her in it. And by every account he gave, things between them were genuinely good. He was happy. He thought she was too. Then out of nowhere, she brought up swinging. Not with strangers. With her close friend couple. People they both knew. People he had to look at across dinner tables and share inside jokes with. People he had barbecued with, watched games with, toasted champagne with at New Year's. People who would now be part of a completely different kind of intimacy in his mind forever, whether he wanted them to be or not. And she did not bring it up gently or with any real sensitivity either. She did not sit him down with care. She did not preface it with acknowledgement of how big a thing she was asking. She dropped it like it was a reasonable suggestion, casual and almost impatient, waited for his reaction, and when he said no, she got angry. He said no. That should have been the end of the conversation. A no in a relationship is not a negotiation opening. It is not an invitation to keep pushing from different angles. It is not a sign of insecurity or immaturity or a lack of love. It is an answer. A complete one. But she did not treat it like one. She called him closed-minded. She called him controlling. She framed his boundary as a defect in his character rather than a reasonable expression of what he was and was not okay with. And then she went quiet, pulling away from him emotionally like he was the one causing damage, like he was the one who had disrupted something, when she was the one who had just detonated a bomb in the middle of their engagement. Let that sink in for a second. She asked for something he was completely uncomfortable with, and when he said no, she punished him for it. Then came the softer version. Just in the same room, she said. Like proximity rather than participation somehow made it a completely different thing. Like the gradual erosion of his boundaries was somehow more respectful than asking outright. This is a pattern that anyone who has ever been in a manipulative relationship will recognize immediately. You start with the big ask. They say no. You act wounded. You let silence fill the room like a verdict. Then you come back with a smaller version of the request, just slightly scaled down, framed as a compromise. Then a smaller version of that. Each time making them feel like they are being unreasonable for still saying no. Each time subtly implying that their discomfort is the problem and not the situation itself. It is death by 1,000 concessions, and by the time you realize what has happened you are standing somewhere you never agreed to go. What made this so much worse was his history. He grew up in a house where he was never enough. Where his feelings were dismissed or ignored or treated as inconveniences. Where existing and trying and showing up did not feel like it was enough to earn love. He had spent years internalizing a quiet, stubborn belief that he was the problem in every room he walked into, and he had carried all of that into adulthood like luggage he could never quite set down. This situation was not just uncomfortable. It was tearing every single one of those old wounds right back open, slowly and methodically. He was not just dealing with a fiancé who wanted something he did not. He was reliving every moment of his life where he had been made to feel like too much and not enough at the same time. And she knew that. She knew his story. She had been there for the telling of it. She had helped him through some of those realizations. She knew exactly where the soft spots were. And she was still doing this. He started pulling away. Not because he wanted distance from her. Not because the love had evaporated. But because staying close felt like slowly suffocating, like trying to breathe in a room where the air was being replaced with something unbreathable. He was terrified of two outcomes that both felt unbearable. Say yes and break himself, cross a line he could never uncross, betray his own sense of self in a way that would follow him forever. Say no and lose her anyway, maybe to resentment, maybe to cheating, maybe to a slow fade that felt worse than any clean ending. He was standing in the narrow space between two versions of pain and he loved her too much to choose either one. So he froze. And freezing has its own kind of cost. That is the emotional state he was in when he made the decision that changed everything. He looked at her phone. Now look, in most situations phone checking is a conversation ender. It is a trust violation that tends to say more about the checker than the checked. But this situation was not most situations. This was a man who had just spent months watching his private insecurities used as tools against him, watching the person who was supposed to protect him instead weaponize the things he had shared in vulnerability. He was drowning and he needed to know if there was solid ground anywhere nearby. And what he found on that phone was so much worse than anything he had imagined, worse than the worst version of the story he had already been quietly telling himself. She had been texting the couple. Telling them everything. Not just that he was hesitant. Not just a vague mention that he needed more time. She had handed over his private fears. His insecurities about his body. The personal details he had only ever shared with her in the quiet and trusting dark of their relationship, the things he told her because she was supposed to be the one person in the world who would hold them carefully. She had packaged up the most vulnerable parts of him and handed them over to people they socialized with like they were gossip, like they were entertainment, like they were nothing. And the way she talked about it was not like someone who had slipped up and overshared something they regretted. It was enthusiastic. There was a lightness to it. A giddiness. She was excited. She literally wrote that she could not wait to finally have some fun time with both of them. Both of them. Not as in her and her fiancé discovering something new together, exploring a new chapter as a unit. Both of them as in this had already been the plan in her head before she ever brought it up to him. He was never the partner she was co-writing this story with. He was never the other half of a conversation about what they both wanted. He was the obstacle she needed to clear. The variable she needed to solve for. The last permission slip she had not yet collected. And the mean comments about his childhood. He said he could not even repeat them. Just imagine for a moment what that actually means. Sit with it. Someone who knows your deepest scars, the most painful chapters of your life, the experiences that shaped you in ways you are still slowly trying to undo, and they are mocking those things. In a text thread. To mutual friends. Laughing about the parts of you that never fully healed. That is not someone who loves you and made a mistake in a moment of frustration. That is not a slip. That is someone who sees your pain as a punchline, who has so little regard for your interior life that your suffering becomes content for a group chat while you are at home thinking they are on your side. He got out of the house. He needed air, walls that did not feel like they were closing in, a face that was not attached to all of this. He went to his female friend from work, the one his fiancé had never liked, had always kept a particular cold distance from, probably because on some level she recognized what genuine and uncomplicated care looked like and felt threatened by the contrast it created. And this friend did not coddle him. She did not just tell him what he needed to hear to feel better in the moment. She told him the truth with the kind of directness that only someone who actually cares about you can manage. Either test her by going through with it and watching her reaction up close, or end it and finally start living for himself. No performance. No softening. Just clarity. And she offered him a place to stay while he figured out his next step, which is the kind of quiet and practical love that matters more than almost anything else when everything is falling apart. That is what real support looks like. He sat with the anger for a while. Let it move through him. The part of him that wanted to go through with the whole thing just to watch it play out, just to stand in that room and then walk out the door before any of it began, just to watch her face shift when she realized the dynamic had changed and he was the one holding the cards now, that part was growing louder by the hour. And honestly? Can you blame him? He was not a vengeful person by nature. He was a guy who had spent 10 years being loyal and loving and trusting, who had handed over the softest and most honest parts of himself, and he had just discovered that the person he built that entire decade with had been treating him like a problem to manage rather than a person to love. The anger was not irrational. It was information. So he went home. He kept his face even and his voice steady. He acted completely normal, the way you do when the performance of normal is the only thing holding everything together. And then he asked her one question. Baby, if I actually agreed to this, what would you want it to look like? The switch flipped instantly. That is 4 words that tell you everything. The switch flipped instantly. She did not pause. She did not take a breath and check the room. She did not say something like, "Are you sure?" or "I want to make sure you are really okay with this," or even just look at him for a moment to see how he was doing. She just lit up from the inside. She kissed him. The kind of kiss that belongs to someone who just got exactly what they wanted. And then she started describing the whole plan in vivid and enthusiastic detail. Who with who? The order of things. The setting. Every detail she had clearly been holding in her head and refining for a very long time, just waiting for this exact moment to finally let it out. She was glowing with a brightness that had nothing to do with him. She could not stop talking. She was more energized, more present, more purely happy in that moment than she had been in longer than he could remember. She was happier in that moment than she had been when he proposed to her. Read that again. Happier than when he proposed. And then came the text. Not even 15 minutes after he said yes, the other girl was already texting him directly. Telling him she had wanted a taste of him since the moment they met. Which means the 3 of them had already been talking about him this way, had already been anticipating this, had already been treating this as an inevitable outcome rather than a request that was still being considered. He was not someone they were inviting in as an equal participant. He was someone they had already decided was part of their plans. He just did not know it yet. He had been a piece on a board being moved by hands he could not see. His fiancée spent the rest of that day walking around like sunshine. Like a weight had finally lifted. Like everything was clicking into place. And he had to watch that. He had to share a home with her, answer her questions, respond to her touch, and do all of it while carrying the full weight of what he knew. He had to stand there knowing everything, watching her be the happiest and most alive she had been in months, and understand in the clearest possible terms that her happiness was not about their relationship finally growing or evolving or deepening into something more honest. It was about her finally getting what she had wanted all along. The joy on her face was not about him at all. He decided he was going through with the Friday meeting. Not because he wanted it. But because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let someone fully reveal themselves before you walk away. 18. Now let's talk about the verdict because this deserves to be said plainly and without softening. She failed him. Not just once. Not just at the end. She failed him at every single step of this process. When she first brought it up and he said no, the right response was to respect that answer and move on. Instead she kept pushing, kept labeling his discomfort as a character flaw, and kept reframing the request until he had nowhere to stand. That is manipulation. Not the dramatic movie villain kind. The quiet, grinding, everyday kind that makes you start to wonder if you really are the problem. When she went to her friends and shared his most private vulnerabilities, she did not just betray his trust. She obliterated it. Trust in a relationship is not just about faithfulness. It is about knowing that the person you love will guard the parts of you that are still healing. She took those parts and made them content for a group chat. She made his wounds into entertainment. And she did it while still calling herself his fiancée, still wearing the ring he gave her, still expecting him to show up as her partner. And the moment he asked that question, that one simple question about what she would want this to look like, and she lit up without a single thought for how he was feeling, that was the final answer. Not a maybe. Not a gray area. A complete, unambiguous answer about where he actually ranked in her mind. He was the yes she needed to get what she wanted. That was it. That was the whole truth of it. And now he knows. And knowing is the only thing that lets you finally start walking towards something better. He is going to be okay. Not yet. Not Friday night, not Saturday morning, not for a while after that. But eventually he is going to look back at this and understand that losing someone who saw him this way was not a loss at all. It was the beginning of finally being free. My girlfriend is getting free guitar lessons and a free guitar from a guy she just met, and I have questions. She came home from that concert glowing. New friend, new guitar, free lessons at his place, and hours of conversation with a guy she just met. And her boyfriend is supposed to just be cool with that. Look, let us start with what this guy actually said. He said he trusts his girlfriend completely. He said he believes she is genuinely excited about music. He is not coming into this with accusations or anger. He came in wanting advice on how to even bring this up without making her defensive. That matters. Because the way someone asks a question tells you a lot about who they are, and this guy is clearly trying to be fair. He is not the type to blow things out of proportion. He is the type to lie awake at night running through every possible interpretation of a situation, trying to give everyone the most charitable reading possible, even when something in his chest keeps telling him something is off. But fair does not mean blind. And something about this situation has a smell to it that is hard to ignore. Let us just walk through the facts as he laid them out. His girlfriend goes to a concert. She meets a guitarist from one of the bands. They hit it off. Shortly after that, this man gives her an instrument. For free. Then he starts giving her lessons. Also for free. At his place. Lessons that last for hours. And apparently a significant portion of that time is not even music, it is just the two of them talking. Sitting in whatever room this man has set up in his home, having long personal conversations, getting to know each other, building something that looks a lot like a close friendship, except that it started with a stranger handing a woman an expensive gift the week after they met. That is the timeline. That is the sequence. And when you lay it out that flatly, without softening any of the details, it starts to look like something with a very clear direction. Now here is the thing about free gifts and free time. Nothing is actually free. That is not cynicism, that is just how the world works. When someone invests that level of time and money into another person they just met, there is always something driving it. Maybe it is genuine generosity and a love of sharing music. Maybe it is something else entirely. But the investment is never random and it is never without meaning to the person making it. People do not give away guitars the way they hand out business cards. That kind of gesture comes from somewhere, and it points somewhere too. It signals priority. It signals desire. It says this person matters enough to me that I am willing to open my home and spend my hours and part with something valuable, all in service of keeping them close. That is not the language of a casual acquaintance. That is the language of someone who has already decided what they want and is building toward it one generous gesture at a time. This guitarist is not teaching at a music school and handing out loaner instruments to students as part of a program. He is a musician who met a woman at his own concert, felt a connection, and then started pouring resources into her in a very specific and personal way. A guitar is not a small gift. A decent guitar costs real money. And time, especially hours of one-on-one time at his own home, is the most personal resource anyone has. His home. Where he lives. Where there is no front desk, no waiting room, no other students warming up in the next room. Just him and her, and however many hours pass before she drives back to the boyfriend who is sitting at home trying to figure out how to feel about all of this. The girlfriend says she is really trying hard at guitar right now. That is great. Learning an instrument is a beautiful thing. The focus it requires, the small daily victories of getting a chord clean or finally nailing a transition, there is real joy in that process and she deserves to experience it. But there are guitar teachers in every city. There are online lessons. There are music schools. There are YouTube tutorials that could carry a beginner through years of progress. The choice to learn specifically from this particular man, at his home, for hours, after he gave her a gift, is a choice that goes beyond just wanting to learn guitar. It is a choice about proximity. About access. About who she wants in her orbit and how close she is willing to let them get. That said, the boyfriend is handling this with a level of self-awareness that honestly deserves some credit. He is not blowing up. He is not issuing ultimatums. He is not going through her phone or demanding she cut contact immediately. He is sitting with his discomfort and trying to figure out how to have a real conversation. That is the mature move. And the fact that he specifically framed his concern around the guitarist's behavior rather than his girlfriend's character shows that he is genuinely trying to extend her the benefit of the doubt. He is protecting her even in the way he is asking the question. But here is what he actually needs to say to her. He needs to be direct without being accusatory. He can tell her that he is not questioning her intentions but that he is genuinely uncomfortable with the dynamic. A grown man she met once at a concert gifted her an expensive instrument and is now spending hours alone with her at his home. That is not a standard mentorship situation. That is a setup that most people would look at from the outside and have questions about. His discomfort is not jealousy for its own sake. It is a reasonable response to an unusual situation. It is what a person feels when they love someone and can see a pattern forming that the person they love has not fully stepped back to examine. He also needs to pay close attention to how she responds. Not just what she says, but how she says it. Does she hear him out and take his feelings seriously, even if she ultimately disagrees? Does she sit with what he is telling her, let it land, and respond like someone who cares about his emotional experience? Or does she immediately get defensive, minimize what he is describing, and make him feel like the problem for even bringing it up? Because those two responses tell very different stories about where they are as a couple and how much his emotional reality actually matters to her. The content of her answer matters less than the spirit behind it. Now here is the part nobody wants to say out loud but someone has to. The guitarist almost certainly has intentions that go beyond music education. That does not mean the girlfriend is acting on anything. It does not mean she is being deceptive. But a man who gives a woman he just met an expensive gift and then spends hours alone with her is not just a generous music teacher. He is pursuing something. And the girlfriend may be completely aware of that and choosing this anyway because she enjoys the attention, or she may be genuinely oblivious and actually believe this is just a cool friendship built on a shared love of music and good conversation. Both scenarios matter. Both require a real conversation. If she is oblivious, she deserves to have her eyes opened by someone who loves her, because operating inside a situation without understanding its full dynamics is not the same as being innocent of it. She can be completely faithful and still be participating in something she has not fully examined. There is a specific kind of vulnerability that comes from being genuinely unaware that someone is pursuing you. You let them closer than you otherwise would. You share more. You interpret their generosity as pure when it is actually strategic. And the person who loves you, watching from the outside, can see the shape of it far more clearly than you can from the inside. That is why the boyfriend saying something is not a threat to her freedom. It is an act of love. If she is aware and choosing it anyway, telling herself it is harmless, telling herself she can manage it, then the boyfriend has a completely different problem on his hands and he needs to know that sooner rather than later. Here is the bottom line on this one. The boyfriend's gut feeling is not paranoia. It is pattern recognition. Free guitar. Free lessons. Hours at his house. Long conversations with a woman he met once. That pattern has a name and it is not just friendship. What he is picking up on is real, and his instinct to want to address it is the right one. He should not sit on this until resentment builds, until small silences start forming between them, until the thing he did not say becomes a wall neither of them can name but both of them can feel. He should not wait until the situation develops further in a direction he cannot walk back from. The longer he waits, the harder it gets to say something without it becoming a bigger confrontation than it needs to be. Right now this is still a conversation. If he waits too long, it becomes an argument about why he never said anything sooner. What matters most here is not the guitarist. The guitarist is going to do what the guitarist is going to do. What matters is whether his girlfriend is willing to be honest with him, willing to take his feelings seriously, and willing to either set appropriate boundaries or at least have an open conversation about what those boundaries should look like. If she can do that, they have something worth working with. If she shuts him down, makes him feel small for being honest, or keeps prioritizing this guy's access to her over her boyfriend's peace of mind, then that right there is its own answer. And if it turns out the guitarist only wants one thing and the girlfriend already knew that and was enjoying the arrangement anyway, then this boyfriend deserves to know the truth now so he can make a clear-eyed decision about what he actually wants. Because a relationship where one person is afraid to speak up and the other is content to let them stay afraid is not a partnership. It is a performance. And no one should spend their life performing for someone who is not even watching. Drop a comment below telling me which story hit harder for you today, and if you want more videos like this one, a like and a subscribe mean the world.